find that that is something you need to recognize when you are interacting with someone. There are some cultures, there's the individualistic culture, kind of like Canadian and US and maybe some Europeans, and then there's a group culture. I love talking about culture. I do lots of cultural parenting workshops where we look at how our culture impacts our parenting. But in terms of this situation, you know, cultures do impact how we talk about abuse or don't talk about abuse. I went to Ukraine with UNICEF, and we were looking at kids who are HIV positive, so children who are HIV positive. We met with the deputy minister of health of the whole country. It was amazing. And her first meeting with us, we don't have a problem with HIV. What are you talking about? When you look at the statistics, the numbers at that time were higher in Ukraine than many African countries that were having a lot of challenges with HIV/AIDS. Higher in Ukraine. And so after we spent time with her, you know, sharing some of the expertise that they had, the people that came with me, she said, you know what, we just don't know what to do. And as we started talking more, she said, you know, many people are Catholic, many people are religious people, and so we're not going to talk about our children having HIV/AIDS, but if you don't talk about it, you're not going to be able to solve the problem. And it's the same thing with domestic abuse. If we don't talk about it, we're never going to be able to support people that need support, or maybe not solve the problem, but at least get it out in the open and prevent it from happening again. So what made this woman at the well such a powerful witness to her community? Why did people really listen to what she had to say? Yeah, she shared a personal experience that she had with Jesus, for sure. Maybe she had a bit of a reputation in the community, so maybe a lot of people knew her. I mean, she was hiding from everyone by going to get her water in the middle of the day when no one would be there. So maybe she had a reputation, but she wanted to share her personal experience with Jesus because it changed her life. So the trauma-informed church is aware of the impact that trauma has on their members, and they're sensitive and compassionate, making sure that this area is safe for everyone to worship. Now, in the Mansas conference, I think we're going to be one of the very first conferences to put into play something called, what is it called, my pastor? It's a safety parameters, policies, that is going to be for the whole conference, where we're going to be looking at safety and protection. Safeguarding, I can't remember what it's called, but you'll be hearing about it soon. So in our conference, we're going to be leaders in making sure that our churches are safe. I'm excited about that. I'm very excited about that. So if your church is wanting to be a place where people can be safe and you can say we're a trauma-informed church, these are 5 keys, and I'm going to talk about each one briefly of what you can do in your church. So the first thing is you can build a leadership team. So if there is someone who discloses something, you don't feel like you have to have the answer if you're not sure what to do. You can say, you know what, I'm going to go to Verna. I'm going to go to my friend over here because she has experience. She knows how to support you. Understanding barriers that victims might encounter. You know, we can always look at the offense of what are the problems, but if we don't look at what the barriers are that victims might encounter, we can't break down those barriers. We can learn to listen effectively. So not just, I said 1, 2, 3, what did I say, 1, 2, 3, but you're listening effectively. What did they mean? What was the emotion behind those words? Like, don't talk to me, or leave me alone, or I don't want to talk about it. But yet you can see from their body language, please let me talk about it, I just am afraid. Pardon? Yes, what aren't they saying? Thank you. Yeah. What are they saying and what aren't they saying? Keeping confidentiality, we'll talk about that a bit, and then providing safety and support. So if you're wanting to look at building a leadership team, here's a few things you can think about. They will understand the lasting impact of trauma. So if someone, let's say someone has been bullied by maybe a Sabbath school teacher, the teacher's shaming, blaming, putting kids in the corner, just not good behavior, and it could harm a child emotionally. Just because they've changed Sabbath schools doesn't mean that they still don't feel that trauma. Does that make sense? It's not until they can get some healing or talk it out or find some better coping skills that they can start the healing, and they can forgive themselves. That's a whole other thing, is the guilt that a lot of survivors feel, that they shouldn't feel guilty for anything, but they often do because of how someone has made them feel. Church leaders recognize trauma also impacts spiritual lives, right? If my father on earth or my mother on earth has hurt me, why in the world would I want to talk to a father in heaven, right? They're just going to be mean also. Church leaders realize that adverse childhood experiences impact families for generations. So when I was teaching, I was doing some research on resilience. We've all heard about resilience, and there's lots of different definitions, bouncing back from hard times. But the definition that I was working with is someone who is resilient can find the resources that they need. So for example, young kids who are joining gangs because they need money, they need power, they need a place to belong, those kids are resilient because they found a way to get money, to get power, to find a place to belong. It was a negative way to show resilience, but they're resilient. So if we don't understand how childhood experiences impact families for generations, we might miss some of the signs that someone is struggling. There is research right now in the social work field that says that people who have had traumatic experiences, it actually changes your brain, changes the neurons, it changes your DNA, something as fundamental as DNA, and it actually can go into the next generation. That was very interesting research that has come up. And again, it's not to make people feel bad or worried. It's just to let you know that we do need to do something about healing. That's why Jesus came. Every place that he went, he shared the good news. He didn't thump them over the head with the Bible. He healed them. He healed them physically, emotionally, spiritually. He healed relationships. It's about healing. That's what Jesus was about. And then you can identify some of the effects of these challenging childhood experiences: depression, anxiety, panic attacks, sleep problems, stress, behavior changes, and low self-esteem. Now, does anyone have any questions about this before I move on? Like, do you feel that churches and church leaders can take this on? I see some people nodding yes. I see some people maybe not sure. What do you think? Is it our responsibility? Maybe we should just let the teachers and the social workers deal with it. I don't know if you heard what she said. She said, how's that been working so far? Yeah, there's too many people that need healing to just leave it up to, people that are trained in that field. Because a lot of people are dealing with these things, and it shows up at your church potluck. It shows up in a board meeting when someone freaks out or flips out, and you're like, they didn't say anything that bad. It's not about that moment, probably, my friends. They've been traumatized. So how can we reach out to them and not tell them, oh, I noticed you were acting crazy, but I'm here for you. What do you need? And maybe they don't want anything at that time, but they know you reached out. That's what matters. You reached out to them with care, and you showed them that you want to help in some way. Church leaders set the tone for others that follow. If I see my church elder, or if I see, one of our board members doing something, people are like, oh, well, in this church, people can get away with A, B, C, D. Or they are leading by example. In this church, there is no one that is going to be hurting anyone else because there's a high standard and priority for safety. So our leaders set the tone. Church leaders are patient when behavior seems undesirable. I know in our church we've had some new people come off the street. We're kind of downtown where I go to church, and so we've had some people come in, and I think when someone was preaching, someone went right up to the front of the church and said, "I don't believe you. The God is coming and you're not." And we're just like, okay, let's carefully take them to the side. "Hello, I'm your elder. How are you?" And the church was kind of freaking out about that, but we just, take it in stride, because our leaders need to be ready for this kind of thing, especially if we're inviting community to come to our church. We can ask questions. What do you need? We can respond appropriately to allegations of abuse. And again, I mentioned it before, and you know this. We can't say, "Well, I know that person. They're my friend. They wouldn't do that." You take it to your pastor or your church leaders, the trauma-informed church leadership team, and you let them deal with it in the proper way. There is a proper way for dealing with allegations, and your pastors have been trained in that, and maybe the elders might have some idea of what that is, but it's something that we do need to be ready for, to respond appropriately. Any questions on the first one, building a trauma-informed leadership team? So the next one is to understand the barriers that victims might encounter. So these are all things that in education we talk about our students. Many students, they might not know the language, they might come from a different culture, they might be coming from a family living in poverty. All of these things impact how people interact with each other and their capacity to interact. So if people in our church or people who are victims of abuse have these barriers, fear of judgment, long waiting lists to access services. If you want to get counseling, you can wait up to 6 months or more, depending on what kind of counseling you want to get. Lack of access to public funds and services. Later, or maybe she passed them out. Thank you to the young person who passed those papers out. But you can see where there are places in your community that you can go to if someone needs counseling or needs support. So there's a few places here in your area specifically, but there still are a lot of barriers. Some people play with stereotypes. Oh, well, if this person is living in poverty, they probably are a victim of this, or they probably aren't educated. Or, you know what I mean? We don't. Abuse does not care about the stereotypes, right? It's open for everyone to be able to heal and to help and to be impacted. So your church can be acquainted with what are the local resources. At one of the churches I went to in Regina, they built a resource board. So when you first come into the church, it has the End It Now, Adventists Against Abuse, and then they have all the resources in the community. I thought that was great, and I've gotten some feedback from a newcomer who visited that church. So it's just a small thing to start with. So I was wondering maybe you can turn to the person next to you, like maybe groups of 3 or 4, and what can your church do to help people when they face these barriers to accessing services? Language, culture, finances, fear of judgment, waiting lists, lack of access. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes. Talk in groups of 3 and 4. What can your church do when people face these barriers to accessing services? one more minute, and then I'll have a couple of groups share some of the things you think your church can do. Okay. Let's hear from a couple of the groups. Maybe let's hear from this group back here. Would you guys like to share? What are some ways that you talked about? Here, I'll bring you the mic. If you're comfortable.
That's part of the group. I guess we just said just having any funds available for people that may be going through that, and also having a diverse team. That way it could involve any culture, anyone that may deal with someone of the same culture maybe, or someone that can understand.
That is a very important point. You know, if I'm from a certain culture that isn't the main culture at my church, I might not feel comfortable to go to someone and disclose some kind of abuse. But when I see that the leadership team is diverse, there's lots of different people, I can choose who I want to talk to, someone that I might feel comfortable with. So that's a great point. This group over here, what are some of the things you came up with?
Here, Larry. We were just talking about being familiar. I'll get my back. Being familiar with what these resources are in Yorkton. And when we have a committee or a group that's going to be that support person or that reference people, actually going to these resources in the community to familiarize yourself, meeting them. So when we do talk or somebody comes to us, we can say, you know what? I've been there. I know these people. This is what it's like. This is what you can, or a counselor. This is who it is. We can talk about what financial resources, if that's needed. And I think as a committee or as a church, instead of looking at people and saying, what happened to them? We can respond and say, or no, what's wrong with them? Having the filter and the mindset of saying, I wonder what happened to them. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And maybe one of the groups over here. Would one of you like to report? Maybe this group here? There you go. Sure.
Well, we were just saying first we need to be aware of what problems are in our society and what can we do. We also have to recognize our own strength as a church. How can we help? We talk of one of our churches that's been involved in prison ministry for quite a few years, and then an inmate they've been talking with got released and came to the church. So what do? This guy has nowhere else to go. You can take him home. You can't just send him away. So the church was in a dilemma. So we need to know our own strengths, what we are capable of doing, and how to go about it.
Thank you for that. That's a very good point. You know, if we want to be the kind of church that our community comes to, we're not going to pick and choose which community members come, are we? Whoever's going to come is going to come. And if you're praying for them to come, God will give you what you need, but you do need to be safe. Safety first. There's one church that I'm working with right now that they're downtown, kind of a new church. People are coming in high. People are coming in mental psychosis. And they're, like, what do we do? Because they've never had to deal with that before. And so then there is training that you can get. Like, it's something I've been working on with ADRA, is this trauma-informed church. How can we train our churches to be prepared? Having cameras in your church, very important. I mean, these are some of the basics that the conference is going to be bringing to you anyways. Having windows on all of your Sabbath school rooms. having a group of deacons or a leadership team so that when there is an issue, you can gently lead them outside of the sanctuary and talk with them and deal with what's happening instead of it taking over the whole service. But you do need to be prepared for that. So it's a very good point. The third key that we're looking at is listening effectively. So the trauma-informed church knows the key component to allow wounded people to inform members through active and effective listening. They hear the people's stories as they're told, not as we wish they were told. And that's a whole lesson there. That's a whole couple of hours of talking there. Someone shares something with you and you're just thinking, this is too much. I wish it didn't happen. Did it happen? Did they imagine it? We can go there. Don't go there. Listen to them as they tell their story. And what are some of the barriers members face when listening? So what are the barriers that the churches face when listening? Maybe I'll ask you first. What do you think are some of the barriers that we have as church members in listening to someone's story? It's uncomfortable. Yep.
Maybe we don't really want to take the time to listen properly.
Yeah. Like I've got to get out of here in 20 minutes, and if it's long, and sometimes it's longer than that. So that's a good point. What can I do about it? That's a great point. A lot of people, we feel like we're not equipped to be able to support someone who's going through a tough time like that. So what can I do? That's a very good point. Some of the other things that we looked at are societal views about abuse. There was a big case in Winnipeg, maybe you heard about it, where a judge said to a woman who had come forth about domestic abuse, maybe your skirt was too short. He was fired, by the way, after going through the courts. He was done. So societal views about abuse, we need to be aware of those. The values of the listener. So, if we have the values of care and respect and integrity, you're going to be able to hear that story a whole lot better than, thinking they should have done something about us, it's their fault, that kind of a thing. The listener's view of the abuser, right? If you hear that it's, someone that you know or a very important person in the community, if your view is they're not going to do wrong, they're a church member, then that's a barrier to listening to the victim talk about his or her story. Another barrier is lecturing or giving advice. We have good advice, don't we, my friends? And that is something I have to really hold